All right. Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you for taking your time joining this session on absolute offline servicing. We are going to go behind the scenes explaining the technology behind offline servicing, which is really not new to Windows 7. It came with Vista, but most people skipped Vista and went to Windows 7. So we are basically doing the comparison from going from XP going up to Windows 7 and what is changing. And I'm Johan. This is Michael.
Yes.
And we will be your hosts this afternoon.
We also have swag that we can deliver to people that ask, have really good questions. So here's yours, and here's mine.
Yep. Done.
Thank you.
That's it.
Yes. Thank you.
So 65 minutes left. All right.
Yeah.
No, we love questions. So at any given time at the seminar, feel free to raise your hand and we'll answer it. All right. PowerPoint master.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what we are going to do the next sort of 70 minutes here is to first dig into the command line tools that enables the technology to do offline servicing. And then we will sort of take it one level above that and put them into perspective of using them together with modern deployment solutions like MDT Toolkit, Config Manager, etc., to see how they are being put in place. And the key takeaway is basically by learning how the command line tool works underneath, behind the scenes, allows you to more quickly and more effectively troubleshoot things related to drivers, packages, and things like that. Things that, of course, never can go wrong in a deployment, never, ever.
No, not in mine. Do you have issues?
I have had the good fortune of being able to troubleshoot that from time to time, and we are basically here to share some of that, experience with you today. Notes from the field, you can call it that if you will. So offline servicing, as most of you know already, it's basically, in the XP days, if you had things that you wanted in your image, like an update, you basically had to take that image, install it or apply it to a virtual machine, install the updates, run sysprep one more time, capture it, and then you have a new image that was, updated. But with Windows 7 and, of course, also Windows Vista, we can now do that server-side. We can apply things to the image before it even boots the first time. And we can do this in two ways. Either when the image is on the actual server before we start the deployment, or when we start the deployment but are still in WinPE and have not yet rebooted into sort of starting Windows. And the benefit of being able to add stuff in that phase rather than doing it online, it's way quicker and it's more secure as well, because when the image starts, it's fully patched and ready to go. So.
Oh, the PowerPoint, yeah. I'm only here for the PowerPoint, if you. Here's my job.
Yeah, it's your slide.
Oh my God, it's my slide, yeah. So we do have two formats. We have the WIM format, and the VHD format. I particularly like the VHD format because that is very simple. It's actually a raw disk, right? It's raw data with the header and the trailer. So you can actually create your own VHD file by just capturing any drive. So I've been to customers, and how do you do a P2V? Well, use DD copy and just copy the file and then add a trailer and a header, and then you have a VHD file. So what? Can you do that? Yeah, you can do that.
So why doesn't everybody on this planet use VHDs for deployment?
Because they are not compressed, which means they really are big, right? They are really big. And the WIM file is better in a way because that is compressed. However, we can't use it directly. We need to apply it or open it. So it's like comparing a cab file. A WIM file is pretty much like a cab file. It just contains the information about the disk image that you can apply or the files that you can apply. So we do use VHDs for some scenarios. One is actually boot from VHD. And the story behind that is that we create a VHD file and we apply it to the machine, and we boot it up, and we run it from there. However, if you do that, it's going to expand at the destination. And they figured out that it's not really that smart to do that. It's actually a better way to create an empty VHD file and apply a WIM file to that VHD file, because we're going to transfer less data over the network, and the network is still going to be the tiny little thing in the process.
So of course, every single Windows 7 version supports booting from a VHD file, right?
Depends what you mean on support.
Point is, it's only supported in the nicer editions of Windows 7, meaning enterprise for you guys, Ultimate as well, but enterprise for the corporate environment. The technology is pretty cool, though. We take our image, as Michael said, we create an empty VHD container, we dump our image into that container, and we close it, detach it. And now we have one single file containing our operating system, and we can take that file and simply copy it to a blank drive. So when I do a directory listing on the drive, it will be my Windows 7.vhd file in there. That's it. And then we can actually configure the bootloader in Windows 7 to boot on that file. And that really takes dual booting to like a whole new level, because you can have 3, 4, 5 VHDs on your drive and simply select which one you would like to boot on when you start. So it's pretty cool technology.
Yep.
But back to offline servicing, it's applicable to both WIM images, to VHD files, and actually also when we have, it's a good song, applied the image to a drive as well before booting it up.
So that's my cue too, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we can mount and remount and unmount images, of course. We can actually use either DISM or ImageX to mount a WIM file. To be able to mount a VHD file, we need to have the old boring disk part utility, of course, otherwise that doesn't work. We can add drivers, we can remove drivers, some of them. Did you ever get a question, can you remove a built-in driver from the inbox driver store?
Yes, I do. And the official answer is no, you cannot. At least not supported. You can only remove drivers that you actually added, and that was new now in Windows 7.
It's a thin line between what you can do and what's supported. So.
You shouldn't. The reason why you would have to remove an inbox driver is that you most likely did something wrong in the first place. Because the reason people are trying to remove the driver is because they have a new driver. And instead of picking up the new driver, the OS selects to pick an inbox driver instead and use that one, even though actually you added your own new driver to the deployment solution you were having. And the reason behind everything is that Windows the plug-and-play service has a ranking process. And by learning and understand how that ranking process works, if needed, you can make your driver better. So it will actually be ranked before the inbox driver. The vendor was supposed to do it for you. Sometimes, it doesn't happen.
No.
So in rare scenarios, you have to fix and update that INF file, that driver. And I'd rather prefer to do that rather than going unsupported and actually start to delete content from the inbox things in Windows, because that can break offline servicing later on.
So worst case so far is a 6-year-old storage driver for Windows XP 32-bit that was better ranked than the built-in Windows 7 64-bit driver.
Which is good.
It blew up, blue screen. Well, yeah, reason behind that is another. Question over there. So the question is, how do you rank your driver? Well, I can't rank the driver. Windows is ranking the driver. But what you do is that you need to modify the INF file behind that and bump it up to say this is a perfect match. It's the super driver for that plug-and-play number. However, when you do that, you're also going to break signing.
So you need to sign it.
So you need to co-sign your own drivers. So that's the issue. So you can bump it up. That's not difficult. But then you also need to co-sign the driver. to make it signed. Otherwise, 64-bit Windows doesn't really like your driver anymore.
Just to give you perspective here before taking too much notes, I've been doing deployment now for about 20 years. I have to do this 3 times, ever.
So what you should do is that you should contact your vendor, and then you should focus on being angry for like 1 hour and get it all out to whomever is answering in the other end, because they just did it wrong. Okay, they need to fix it.
It's a really rare exception, right? But that's how you fix it, rather than, as the question was, delete stuff from inbox.
So we can add, remove, we can enumerate drivers, of course, to see what's in there. We can get packages and features and stuff like that.
Language packs?
Language packs we can ask for, or installed application. We can actually ask for applications.
So if I really want to have that chess game in Enterprise, which is disabled by default, I can get it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just enabling a feature. We can also, of course, upgrade to a higher edition of Windows, which is kind of awkward. I mean, most of my customers do Enterprise, so they can't really upgrade that. I mean, it's Enterprise. But if you do have, I don't know, no, I wouldn't say professional. If you do have Home Edition, you can upgrade that without reinstalling the operating system to Ultimate. You just need to provide a new key for it, but it's possible, since that is the same image. It's an OEM scenario. Most likely it's going to be OEM scenarios, private home computer users, stuff like that.
So not really relevant for corporate users at all.
But I would really like to see a home user fire up DISM to upgrade to a new edition of Windows. Yeah, I'm doing this command line. It doesn't really work. Yeah. You can't do that anyway.
Next slide.
Next slide.
So, what's the difference between ImageX as a command line and DISM as a command line? What is it that we can do in ImageX that we cannot do in DISM? Capture and type a lot less when mounting images. Yes, sir. It's about half the amount of commands you have to type, because ImageX and DISM, they both can mount and dismount images or unmount images, yes, but typing with ImageX is about half compared with the equivalent DISM command.
And the only reason behind that is very easy. Since everybody's doing PowerShell and the guys behind DISM didn't belong to the PowerShell team, they want to be a wannabe PowerShell command-like.
So they wrote all the commands like you would in PowerShell, but they skipped auto-completion, so you really have to type them all. Yeah. Anyway, ImageX and DISM. With ImageX, we can do apply and capture of images. We cannot do that with DISM. With DISM, we can do offline servicing, adding drivers, updates, packages, etc., features. That we cannot do in ImageX. So depending on usage, we are using the different tools.
It used to be called something else. Before DISM, we had something. Do you remember Package Manager?
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually the worst application ever written. I think the guy behind that won a prize for worst application.
Yeah, they had like an internal prize, like worst utility ever written. Yeah. That's the one.
And it come number 1, number 2, and number 3. So it's bad. Change that to DISM. Thank God for that.
Another way of getting patches and updates and features into the image is actually also running setup. So you can actually provide a nice unattended XML file, kick off setup, and have it use that answer file. And if you have instructions in the answer file to do offline servicing, it will happily do so. The only problem here is, what do you think is really happening in the background? I will show you that in the log files later, but you will actually see setup calling DISM to do the injection.
So setup is a wrapper for DISM.
Not entirely true, but it calls it.
Yeah, it can do other things too, like installing Windows.
Yeah.
You can also, of course, update the Windows PE image and work with that. DISM also works online, almost. And I say almost because one of the things that it doesn't do online is drivers. And I have no clue on why. It just doesn't work doing drivers. You can list drivers, you can but you can't add remove drivers, which is something that you might want to do, but then you need to use another utility called PnP Util, because PnP Util can do it online.
You can also download from the driver installation framework. There is a utility set called dpinst that also allows you to do online driver installations after an OS is deployed. You can see it as you have deployed like a few machines, 100, and then you realize, oh, one of the wireless drivers is broken. Now you have the option of either update the driver on the deployment solution and redeploy them, or push out a package using either PnP Util or dpinst to install that updated driver. All right.
Oh my God, it's demo time.
It says Q&A, but it's really demo.
We have no idea why it says Q&A, because when we turn in the slide, it says demo. Then it passed through the Microsoft Silverfox filter driver, and then it turns out to be Q&A instead.
But it's a demo. Every time you see a Q&A, it's really demo because we accept questions at all times.
Exactly. I was C, right?
Question.
All right.
What was that application you just mentioned?
DP. Yeah.
Yeah.
Driver Installation Framework. I think the latest version is 2.1 or something like that.
So that application is most likely used by vendors. In many cases, they throw in that application in their install packages. So when you install whatever application, it also shoots in the driver store. It is not the perfect utility, but it can install driver. I prefer to use PnP Util because it's easier, and it's kind of more supported. But
and I like the DPinst because it gives me more flexibility. It can do more things.
now you can do crazy stuff. That's the point.
Actually, if you download an Intel wireless driver, you will actually see they are using dpinst to install that driver. Yes, sir.
So was there some rationale behind not extending the functionality of ImageX and creating a new tool?
So the question was there any reason behind not extending ImageX and rather have like two tools that are sort of similar? I have no idea.
But it's pretty common that when they have one tool and it doesn't really work, they create two other tools to compensate the lack of features in the first one. Then we have three tools. I mean, I think Johan did the calculation on the number of deployment solutions that Microsoft has created the last 14 months. It's 14. They create a new OS deployment solution every month. Makes sense. You have one. Let's create another one. Anyway.
Back to offline servicing.
Yeah, back to offline servicing. So let's see how this looks like.
What are you going to do for us?
I have no clue, but I'm going into my folder where I have this
I
stuff.
have, because
Yeah, I know.
I have your demo manuscript here.
So what I have here is a bunch of files. I have a VHD file. I have an install Vim file. I have some drivers. I have a mount folder. I have some packages. Happens to be a language pack. Could be something else, but that happens to be that. And here's some kind of security
Patch.
Very nice. And
So you have a few images and you are about to add stuff to them
yeah,
offline.
yeah, basically. I think that's good, right?
Good summary. Yeah.
So why would you actually add drivers into an image instead of letting the unattended installation fix drivers?
Storage.
Could be storage. You could need to have it in WinPE. Why would you add security patches? Why don't you use Windows Server Update Services? It takes long. It's not fast. It's in the image from the beginning. In some cases, there are patches that really need to be in the image before you fire it up. Otherwise, that driver doesn't work. Or, yeah. Correct. And we have the new filter driver for 4K drives, which most likely would like to have it in the image from the beginning. Yeah. So, I mean, there are different reasons. Also packages. So, and we can solve this in deployment solutions, but in some cases, we really need to get them in there before. Let's do this. Here's a very nice command.
Why didn't you just type it?
Because I'm a very boring guy, and I do like that instead. To be honest, I do keep a bunch of text files with commands that I have used, and I modify the text file itself, and then I do copy and paste, because when you type, at least I type, I belong to the old school. You remember the old school?
Batch files?
And you start with that, and then you increase the speed by adding another one, which means that I can't really type on a keyboard. I need to also look at the keyboard when I'm typing.
So you are now mounting an image
Yes.
to a folder.
Correct. And with a bit of luck, it will finish.
Before this session is over.
Yeah, exactly. Mounting is usually not the problem. Dismounting is another story that usually could be a problem.
Let me just spend a little time on the filter driver, because what allows Michael to mount this WIM file to a folder is a filter driver in the OS. And in Wike version 2, which we are using, and that's a requirement for Windows 7, Microsoft changed that driver a bit. So it's now about 10 times slower than the previous version, and it's also a bit unstable. And
But
I think
it has a new feature.
it has new features. But the reason behind this is that it basically was 3 companies in the world that wanted a change in the filter driver. Those companies were Dell, HP, and Lenovo. And when Dell, HP, and Lenovo goes to Microsoft and say, we would like to have this feature, Microsoft says, yes, sir, will do, or ma'am. And the point is, they wanted to be able to edit, read, write multiple images on the same time on the same server. So how many of you in here edit multiple images on the exact same time? Don't see many hands. Half a hand. The point is, you normally don't do that. But in order to support multiple writes, they had to rewrite the format. But that's not the entire truth. It is the truth, but it's not the entire truth. Because there was also a small bug in the previous version. If you committed massive changes into an image, I was working with a customer, their smallest image was 18 gigs in size. It was an airline. When you committed 12, 13, 14 gig into that WIM, sometimes a few % of that data were lost. Poof, gone.
But only sometimes.
Only sometimes. Yeah. So they fixed that by adding a bunch of verification steps to that process of committing stuff into the image. And that's why it's slower. What about the instability then? It turns out when we have done our offline servicing that Michael will show you, we commit the changes, right? And that cleanup process normally fails if you have any Explorer window open. The new version is extremely sensitive to open file handles. The 100% foolproof workaround, close Explorer before committing changes, and you're good.
And don't run any antivirus or anything like scanning the hard drive or nasty things.
Now you may add stuff.
Thank you. So just before we continue, I think this is still the most funniest part when you just mount this. I mean, it's like, yeah, we still have an AutoExec batch file in that.
I remember those.
And the config.sys file with buffers and all that stuff. We are old. Oh my God.
I used to create menus in those.
Yeah. So number 1 is mounting. The other one is to get information. And here's actually another funny command. Number 1, if you don't do format table, it's going to look like, bleh.
And you are doing what right now?
I'm getting my drivers, my third-party drivers, from that image. So I want to see what kind of drivers I have in this image. This is a Windows 7 32-bit enterprise.
So that's a third-party driver.
Yeah, correct. As you can see, I have 2 of them. I have a RTM gold image, a version of the OEM printer driver from Microsoft, and I have also the Service Pack 1 version of it. Very nice to have. So when you list drivers, please, please, please add the format table, and pipe it out to some driver list.txt.
That is actually the XPS driver in Windows 7. It's the only third-party driver in box.
Because if you read drivers that way, it's going to be much easier to find and search. You can also use, of course, DOS command like filter and find and string and handling in that way too, but normally a Notepad document is fine. So that is drivers. We can also get other things like features. Yeah, I know it's going to be in the text file called driver list, but it doesn't really work. So what we can see here is some kind of fun stuff going on.
Chess is disabled. Need to change that.
Yeah, we can see that inbox games are disabled. We can also see that the other games here are disabled pending, which means that they were disabled and then they sysprepped and captured the image, so they will actually be disabled when we fire up this image the first time. They are just kind of disabled. Not really, but... And that is what's going to happen when you add or remove stuff from it. In some cases, it's going to say pending. Here you can see that the media center is, for instance, enabled pending, and we have the optical media disk that is also pending. Let's add something. I know that you would like to have the games. You're not going to get the games right now. I'm going to add the Telnet client first, because that is more geeky. Games is for, I don't know. Ugh.
You're talking to a die-hard StarCraft fan over here.
Yeah. So...
But I agree, Telnet client is cool.
Telnet client is cool. Let's add Telnet client. Didn't work. I did one small mistake. And what was that? No, you can't answer. I'm so sorry.
Exactly.
It's case sensitive. And since when did Windows start being case sensitives? Well, it started when they started to hire people from university that is young and are used to do Linux. So now we are getting the, please, you need to be case sensitive suddenly. Let's see the, feature list.
So you don't trust the injection? You really want to make sure it's actually...
I don't trust my wife. I don't trust my kids. I barely trust you. And I don't trust anyone. And as you can see, it happens to be enabled pending. So now we added that. Can I remove this without actually booting up this image? Yes, you can. Just a matter of killing it. It worked perfectly fine. So let's add the games. You wanted chess, right?
Yes, please.
Oh, God. Yes, you're going to have chess. It's only because I'm nice. The completed but chess feature was not enabled. Ensure that the following parent features are enabled first. Oh, parent features. Well, you need to know that you also need to have the inbox games enabled to be able to enable chess. So it's not really that friendly, telling you in exact what order. So you might need to test things and enable things and disable things. And after a while, you will figure it out. But that's the way we do it. So that's about enabling features. What about adding drivers? Yeah, you can do that too, of course. The benefit of using DISM when you add drivers is that it has the feature of being recursive. I like that. Ever played with PnP util to add drivers? it's not kind of recursive. It's that driver, that folder, that driver. And that works, right? Ugh. If you really want to be recursive, use 4 files. 4 files, star.inf in the following subdirectory, run the command pmp util to add those.
Or VBScript or PowerShell. It's totally okay as well.
I'm old, so I'm allowed to do patch files. Let's add the drivers. In this case, I'm going to add the following drivers, and this is a bunch of drivers.
We actually have a guy in the room who is even older than you are. He's been with computers even older than you are, or have. Hey, Mark.
Oh my God.
Hi, guys.
Hi. Welcome. I wouldn't say he's older. He's just looking older.
The first computer I ever bought, the book I ever bought was his book.
Yeah.
And that was like a long time ago.
So here we have a bunch of drivers. So here we have a bunch of drivers. Very simple, HP drivers, just downloaded. And I download them and unpack them using the Softpak utility. And then we fire up and we add drivers.
So you're adding every single driver in the folder.
Yeah,
Bam.
into the image. Now, I don't really like this method. But let me tell you this. I was fighting to get a driver from a smart card driver into an image using the proper method. Dynamic deployment, mandatory driver groups, blah, blah, blah. And it just refuses to get into the driver. 2 hours, then I just stopped and say, hey, I'm going to use this and just bang it in. Works perfectly fine. So it happens that you just do DISM to fire the drivers in. And there are, I would say, one valid scenario, and that is when you do have drivers that really needs to be in the image, even if the hardware is not there. Then you can use DISM to fire them in. You can also use different methods in, of course, DISM, and, in MDT or in CCM, of course. This takes a while.
It's a big driver.
Yeah, kind of. Fun thing here is you can see that even if it fails, just continue. There was a problem opening the INF file, blah, 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 blah. Couldn't read the INF file, la, 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 la. But it just continues to work.
Do you guys know what the most common issue is when running DISM like Michael do and specifying an INF file? The most common issue we see in the forums is access denied. You get an access, denied number 5. And it doesn't mean that you didn't have access to the driver or that you was an admin in the system. It's usually just that when you download drivers from the internet, they get blocked, when going between zones. So if you get an access denied, right-click the driver, properties, click unblock, and try again. Or use the streams command from sysinternals to remove all blocked, or it's basically an NTFS attribute or stream that is getting added to the file. And the problem goes away.
I'm not sure I have it, but it's usually down here. So now we have all the drivers, and let's verify that the drivers are actually in there. Looks pretty nice. We have a bunch of drivers, and it seems to be installed. It's not inbox and class and provider.
And this, by the way, is the same for Windows PE images as operating system images. In the Vista timeframe, we used to have different utilities. Not anymore. Yes, sir?
What was that sysinternals tool you were
The question was, what was the sysinternals tools? It's named Streams.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just go to the sysinternal site and download every tool they have. You're going to need to use them somewhere in time anyway.
It's good stuff, really.
So now we have verified the drivers. Let's go to packages. My biggest mistake when I do this is that I type wrong when I actually type it manually. It's get drivers, but it's always add driver. And when you fiddle around in text file, you, at least I do, miss the fact that I need to remove the S. Get packages. And let's get a pack list. Make sense?
Yep.
A pack list, like a pack list. Notepad, sorry, notepad, pack list. Here's the stuff we have in. We have local pack for different languages, Internet Explorer optional package, IE Troubleshooter, Foundation pack, Codec pack basic, yeah. And some of them are installed pending and tells me what it is. It's a patch we have. What about adding something? The magic command would be add package something. I think I have it here. I didn't do it. Add package. Let's show you that first. You either specify package path or you specify package ID or something, but I usually have the package path. Package path colon oh, sorry, that's the wrong location. T colon backslash events. Is it TechEd something? VCL, demo, packages. Oh, we're getting there.
And this package is what?
This happens to be the remote server administration tools.
Toolkit.
Yes.
All right. So now we'll be able to...
Yeah, now we can do DHCP something from the Windows 7 client. When you add this, when you do add the package may contain feature itself. So even if I just add the package, it will not really be there. It's just in the image. You also need to enable the feature of the different features in that packages you would like to have. Question over there, sir.
Yeah, so does this actually install the patch, or does it stage it for processing when the Vim and the unattended starts?
Yeah, so that depends.
Repeat the question.
Yeah, I'm going to repeat the question. Is this going to stage the package, or it's going to install the application? It depends on the application or the package itself.
In this case, it will stage it so that we have to go in and actually flip the switch.
But a patch, for instance, most likely they will be installed or you modify the Vim file itself. It doesn't really matter. The behavior will be the same, but it depends. And you have the same story about the pending enabled and pending disable. Reason behind that is that some of these requires a reboot. Otherwise, it doesn't really happen. But I still really want to know, so I always check after I install the package or a patch if it says, pending or something like that. Most likely, I really want to ensure that that machine is rebooted at least one time. It's processing 101. Yeah. So what we can do also, of course, is now we're playing with the Vim file. We have a question over there. So the question is, what if I want to modify a registry key? Well, can you do that, Johan?
Yes, you can, but not natively. The dism command doesn't have a sort of a registry and file copy operation. It doesn't. But I have been writing plugins for boot images where I add files and registry keys, etc., to get them working. And so I create a driver that do the file copying and registry information, because that's what a driver do. And then you can run dism and inject that info file that will create the registry and the files. There was a comment somewhere.
You can also use regedit.
You can also use regedit, of course, yes.
But then you need to do it. So if you use regedit, which also works, then you need to do it manually. If you do the faking stuff by creating a bogus driver that only modifies things, then it's automatic. So it's not really a driver. It's just a bunch of, please modify this, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it
Question
works.
over there.
You're putting patches into your image. What's the best practices for handling superseded patches?
So what is the best practices for handling superseded patches? Well, we're showing you this for one purpose only, and that is to understand how this works. The best way to handle reference images, because that's what we are talking about, right, is to rebuild them on a regular basis in an unattended and automated way. That is why both Johan and I use Microsoft Deployment Toolkit and Light Touch to create reference images. The only patches I actually provide into the image is stuff that is either impossible to get in another way, or maybe it's a hotfix super download, whatever it is. So I try to avoid having drivers in my reference image or patches in my reference images. So I prefer to have them later on.
The short story is that DISM doesn't provide any real logic in finding out that, okay, this package is really a newer version than that package and automatically gets it. You have to have that logic in the commands calling DISM or in the solutions calling DISM. This is just the core logic of getting the components into the image. Yes, sir. The question was, is there an IE9 package? Yes. I will show you later because I have it on this machine.
Oh, you have it on that machine?
Yeah, that's for later.
So I'm only running two 256 SSD drives with 16 gigs of RAM and 8 cores. So that is why it's so slow. Or maybe DISM is kind of slow.
But can you please go over to the PowerPoint while we are waiting for that one?
Do you mean flip over to the PowerPoint?
Yes.
I can flip over to PowerPoint. Is the A?
Yes.
Yeah.
So hit next. So we can also use Windows Setup to inject components like this. And as I said, setup in turn will call DISM. But now we rather create an answer file for setup, and we specify in that answer file what components we would like to add. And in order to use this, you need to understand that in the XP days, as you know, well, most of you at least, we had different answer files for different things you wanted to do. You had an unattended text if you wanted to do a scripted setup. You had sysprep-in for cloning an image or resealing an image. You had sysprep-in for automating the deployment of an image. You had WinBOM INI for WinPE. All those are gone and replaced by one single file now. But we now have different sections in that file, depending on what we want to do.
So the basic line is it behaves the same way anyway.
No, but it's one file.
Yeah.
Still a text file, but
Yeah.
it's a structured
Yeah.
text file. So
And
what section do you think we want to add the stuff in? Well, of course, it's offline servicing. So that's where we add the components.
Yeah. And here's one question that I sometimes get is that I can do all really nice things in generalize and specialize. Why can't I do them in offline servicing? Well, because that package or feature wasn't really designed to be able to do that in the offline servicing. So can you fix that? No, you can't. If it's not available for offline servicing, it's not available for offline servicing.
Can I have my
End of story.
first PowerPoint?
Okay.
We need to do it correct.
Oh.
So Q&A on...
And you're B.
No, D.
You're D.
D. Laptop number 2. So,
Yes, you're D.
yeah. On this machine, I have the authoring utility for unattended XML file. And it's called Image Manager. And it's better than Notepad to edit unattended XML files.
But just slightly.
Slightly
Yeah.
better.
And
yeah.
the only reason why it's better is that it supports the F1 help when you're in a dialog box you don't understand. Notepad doesn't do that for you, but otherwise, it's...
So here I opened a answer file. And as you can see, I have added 2 driver paths in here. One that is actually on a server share. And since I'm pointing to a UNC path here, I'm also providing credentials to access that server share. But I also have a second path, and I'm pointing to a local folder. So these are the components I added to my answer file. And the only thing I need to do now is to make sure that Windows Setup is using this file. And it will go ahead and use it, import those features. So I have created a virtual floppy here. Where I've added the said auto-unattend XML file up here. And I will go to VM. And this VM is configured. I'm just going to close this one. This VM is configured to boot on the Windows 7 DVD mounted as an ISO. And I've also injected my floppy drive. And the BIOS order in the machine is set to boot from CD first and floppy last. Otherwise, you will have a sort of a insert system disk to continue thing. Also DOS. So I will start this machine, and it will automatically boot into WinPE. It will automatically run setup. And since I named my answer file auto-unattend specifically, it will find it. Because Windows Setup is searching all removable medias for files named exactly that. If it couldn't find the file, or if I did a typo, it will simply stop and ask me a lot of things during setup. So hopefully now, the setup will simply kick in, and you will soon see the nice white setup engine starting. It's currently partitioning in the drives, and then it will kick off and do setup.
Are passwords that are stored in that XML file encrypted?
The question was, is the passwords that is stored, are they hidden? No, they are in plain text for a while, then deleted out of the image. You will see in the answer file after deployment is done, sensitive data deleted or something like that, it says. But here you see setup running. And the offline servicing will actually happening as soon as it's expanding the WIM file to the drive. Then it will inject the patches. So if I jump 12 minutes in time here, in the future, which is cool, but we can do that with snapshots. I have the same machine 12 minutes later. And now I can actually go into the log files, Panther folder, and CBS unattend. That's the log file for setup calling DISN. So for example, open this one up and searching for the driver, you can actually see it downloaded, in this case, a driver from MDT01 over the network server. So that's how we can verify that something was actually injected offline, by this time by running setup. All right. PowerPoint and...
PowerPoint. 2 seconds.
Enter. Lovely. So, the common deployment solutions that are out there is using exactly this to inject components. They just provide you guys with a nice UI for it. So MDT 2010 Light Touch is always running setup.exe to do its offline servicing thing. So MDT Light Touch will generate on the fly that unattended XML file and then kick off setup, and setup will happily use it. MDT is also using DISM for all the packages it adds, and the same goes with Config Manager. Depending on your package type, when you do Config Manager deployments, it will either run setup or it will run a component called OSD apply OSX.exe or OS.exe, not OSX. That's another platform, right? Yeah. But the point is these tools are running in the background. And as long as everything is fine, you don't have to worry about these tools. But when things break, that specific driver break, what's the driver? Touchpad thing, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't Synaptics, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Pretty funny. Have you tried to install a machine on Hyper-V? I mean, a Windows 7 machine, virtual in Hyper-V, and you happen to have the Synaptics touchpad driver in the driver store? Because no, but it's in a VM, right? And it's going to do a plug-and-play detection. And for some reason, the Synaptics touchpad driver, that works with everything. They have set the ranking to perfect for anything that looks like a mouse, which means that it's going to try to install the Synaptics touchpad driver into
In
Hyper-V.
Synaptics defense, they fixed the driver by now, but I just wanted to point that out. So, hit something.
Hit something. I can hit you. Sorry.
All right. My machine back, please. So, the way it works when using deployment solutions to do the same thing is that you go to the UI of that deployment solution, and you normally manage the packages and updates and drivers from here. So I'm starting off with Light Touch. Here, for example, I have a packages folder inside the console where I've simply right-clicked and said import, and in this case, I'm added a few packages for Server 2008 R2. And those that are knowledge base savvy here can see that these are a few hotfixes for Hyper-V to work with a newer processor like Core i5 and Core i7. But I simply downloaded those packages from Microsoft from the catalog site, because that allows you to download a bunch of them at the same time. And then I right-click and I do import. I can create folders and profiles in here to allow me to define what subset of packages that is supposed to go to a given image. Otherwise, if I don't do that filtering, it will try to inject every single package I import. So what I don't normally recommend you guys to do, if you do add in packages like this, take the time of actually creating a filter. In this, I created a filter for one filter for Windows 7 packages. So I'm only installing packages belonging to Windows 7. And then in my sequences that is used to deploy Windows 7, I will simply have to go and in the packages option here, I would select that selection profile. So it doesn't try to install every single package in my system. As you can see, this is really the power of a deployment solution, because setup is basically doing this here. This is one action running setup. But modern deployment solutions, and it's not only Microsoft, they allow you to do things before applying an image and certainly after applying an image. And in this case, this allows me to stage drivers on the drive, apply all my packages, etc., but I will pull the packages from the UI instead. So if I go to a client, number 2, and start a deployment. In this sequence, I'm going to select, I've actually added a pause, or a bunch of them. So when it comes to the step that actually will do the driver injection, it will stop. And I will not pixie boot, I will boot on a media. Save some valuable time. Here we go. Booting from Pixie using a VM takes about 30-35 seconds. Booting from a ISO, about 2 seconds to get the media loaded. And then this time is, of course, the same. This is where Windows PE starts, loads its drivers, and do things like that. Kicking off the background, changing the screen resolution by calling an unattended XML file in the root. So if you want to have a different screen resolution, you can just change that text file. And then it will soon kick off the wizard that MDT Light Touch is using.
You know, one funny thing I've seen for both in training and classes is that there's a step that you show them that adds drivers in the Light Touch wizard, right? Yeah. In the task sequence. I've seen customers trying to say, I would like to add drivers at a later time. So they just move it. And it doesn't work. And then you try to explain for the customer how it actually works, and it goes like, uh-huh. So we really need to add the drivers when we are offline. I did have a customer that needed to add drivers when he was online, and then we created a PMP util kind of script file that leveraged that instead, since that works online.
Exactly. DISM really only works offline in terms of drivers. It works online for packages and things, but not for drivers. Here you can see this action says inject drivers. And now MDT, in this case, is actually detecting the hardware I'm deploying to, connecting back to the deployment share, and copy the right drivers locally. So they will put the drivers, and I can show you, they will put them in the C:drivers folder. So they are adding the drivers in here before setup kicks in. And they also generate, or rather copying a template of an unattended XML file put in this folder. And if you go down in this unattended XML file, you can actually see they are adding in an offline servicing section pointing to this path, which is C:drivers. And now it will go recursive into all the folders in here and just add them in by calling setup later. Yes, sir?
Does SCCM OSD work the same way, or?
So the question was, does Config Manager do the same thing? And I'm very happy that you asked, because I happen to have the exact same scenario here, but not on that server. And not on that server, but on this server. The answer to the question is, it depends. Because in Config Manager, first of all, we have different ways of applying images. Running setup and running OSD apply OSXC, sorry. And then we also have different methods of applying drivers in Config Manager, 2 of them. So we have a sort of a matrix building up here. But in general, for example, if I create a sequence like this, I can do my JSON sequence. We did a pre-con on Monday here. And I go in and, for example, add in that I sure would like to have a driver package injected for my, let's see, 8530 here. So I add in that package, and as usual, I normally set the condition to this package, so only apply if the hardware I'm deploying into actually is that hardware. So in this case, I'm using a WMI query to say only inject this stuff for machines where model like, meaning containing the string HB comeback. And I prefer to use like rather than equal, because some hardware has like a tendency of having a revision number in the end. And I won't mention any names,
don't
but
do that.
HP is such a provider. So I used to like,
Yeah.
right? So I'm adding a condition to this step. And if I add in driver this way, they will be injected during deployment. And if I open one of the log files here, which I happen to have, I think it was this one. Here we go. You can actually see, let me zoom in on this. You can actually see they are calling DISM. They are generating a really short template on the fly, drivers XML, for every single driver. And then they use DISM to inject it. But if you're real quick, because that is deleted like 2 milliseconds later, you can actually get that folder. And then you get the DISM log file, of course, but you also see the driver's XML file. In this case, it was injecting apparently a card reader driver. But it was using DISM to do this. And if you do normal deployments using Light Touch, using Config Manager, and they start to break, remember what Michael showed you before, and all right, get in a command prompt, run it interactively and see if things pop up on you. Yes, sir?
Patches are online or offline?
I love those questions. Here. Because the answer is it depends. It's a power stick, 4 gig. It will drive your phone for an hour as well as being a USB device. In Config Manager, in MDT, we have different ways of applying packages. Because we can apply, for example, updates and language packs online, or we could do it offline. So depending on what you select, it will behave differently. Offline, it will use DISM to do. Sorry?
When you do an MDT task sequence, it drops it into the servicing.
Yeah. MDT is doing it offline.
Okay, the question was how MDT was using it. All right.
Config Manager eConfig Manager, you have the option, but in MDT, it's going to be offline. So MDT is going to do patches, drivers, packages, all that stuff.
The only thing that MDT, of course, doesn't do offline, it's basically when you enable features. If I go to a sequence, and that's the same in Config Manager.
Yeah, they enable them when the operating system is running.
Let me see, I have a sequence here that actually deploys a Config Manager server with all the components it needs.
That's pretty fun to have a task sequence in Config Manager that
deploys to Config Manager. Yeah. But Config Manager requires a bunch of components, right? For example, .NET Framework, which is required by SQL, which is required by Config Manager. And I'm simply using built-in functions in MDT and Config Manager to add these components into my operating system. And this is actually happened in the state restore phase, which is after the image is applied and rebooted. So in the running OS, online.
The state restore, you got to install software updates.
Yes.
So that's doing software updates with WSUS and online.
Yes. And there was actually a hotfix released this Friday for that feature because this has been the number one pain point for Config Manager customers for a while.
Stalls.
It stalls. Yeah, really stalls. So what customers was doing before the hotfix got here, they actually used the MDT integration and they installed the updates offline instead because that one works. You just disable a step. Yeah, another option would be to use this instead or get the hotfix. So back to PowerPoint.
PowerPoint?
Yes, sir.
PowerPoint is this. That's PowerPoint.
Yes,
I've
sir.
seen it before.
So, what to do when things go wrong? As always, dive into the log files. Now that we have learned that, all right, we are using MDT, we are using Config Manager, but really, in the background, there are other components playing. Setup is running and doing things, so we have to review the setup log file, which is the top one, setup act.log file. Has nothing to do with MDT, has nothing to do with Config Manager, has nothing to do with Ghost, Altiris, or whatever you're using. It's the setup log file. So if you're doing offline servicing through unattended XML files, check that guy. And since setup calls other components like DISM, like component-based servicing, you have to check those log files as well. And they can often give you sort of a clue to why things are happening. And these log files are in the Windows logs folder unless specified otherwise on the command line. If you saw my command line before from DISM here, they are actually piping it to a specific log file for a while so that it's easier. And you can do that too when whoop. You are not doing your job, sir.
You didn't tell me.
I know. Thank you, sir. They're actually piping the command as well here using the log path value. So, and I know that Michael is eager to show you a sort of variant of working with.
You mean how to cheat?
Yeah. So because we have been talking about images, Vim, we're talking about VHD, we've been talking about deployment solutions, but there are sort of mixes in between that we can use. And I know you have a favorite utility you like to vouch for.
Yeah, I do have that. Let's flip over to demo.
Yes.
I'm B. No, I'm
You're C, sir.
C. Just checking. I'm C. He's D. Anyway. So the scenario is the following. Let's assume that you do. Is anybody doing Hyper-V in here? Hyper-V? Virtual PC? Anyone?
Hope not.
Anyway. I do a lot of Hyper-V. I do like demos on Hyper-V and stuff like that. And it's pretty fun to have other things like boot from VHD. Anyway, you need to create your VHD file, right? Most people create the VHD file in the following way. Install it on a Windows Server 2008 R2 Hyper-V server, do sysprep and capture, or sysprep and turn it off, and then you have the VHD file. How long does that take, approximately, to install a Windows machine and sysprep and turn it off? Half an hour? 40 minutes?
Most likely, yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty decent.
So you have a script for that.
Well, kind of. There's the tool called Vim to VHD. Anybody play with that? It's lovely.
Beautiful.
It is. C script. Gives you a bunch of opportunities. And it's actually using ImageX and other components to make this work. Yes. It's going to, you specify a path for it. Yeah, you can specify other things, but the fun thing is that you can specify, please use that unattended XML file. Please inject those patches.
So it does offline servicing.
It does offline servicing, and blah, 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 and so on. So the simple command is the following. To run this, I'm just going to verify that I have an ISO image mounted here somewhere.
It basically takes your normal image, dumps it to a VHD file, creates it, of course, and also inject whatever you would like to have injected at the same time. Something that, well, a normal deployment solution would do, but they don't yet support deploying to VHDs. They will in the next releases. MDT 2012 will support VHDs, but current release doesn't. So this is a sort of a nice...
So this takes about 3 minutes to create your VHD file with your customized unattended XML files together with your patches, and then you have a sysprep image. And I didn't even install Windows. I just, here's a ref image.
Dump it, go.
Dump it. And now you can use boot from VHD by just deploying the stuff and run it. So if I want to test Windows 7 Service Pack 1 or 2 or something, you want to test something, just create the Vim file, mount the Vim, create the VHD file, mount the VHD file, and use BCD boot to enable it to boot. Reboot your machine, select your new image. So it takes me less than 5-10 minutes to test a new image, which means that I also can have any kind of operating system on my physical machine. I do run one operating system, but then I have a bunch of VHDs that I can select and boot from. And now my time is out, so I need to change over to
You
Johan
need to
again.
go to the important PowerPoint, right?
Yeah.
Because next one, next one, next one, next one.
Ah, that one.
We would like you to, if possible, please fill in the evals. They are important to us. As always, be honest but gentle, and thank you for taking your time.
Thank you so much.